Hello and welcome to episode 47 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. This week's guest is Matthew Aaron. Matt is a singer-songwriter and fine art painter from Indianapolis, Indiana. He's in an amazing band called Endiana, spelled with an E-E-N-D-I-A-N-A. They toured with Pinky Doodle Poodle, my Japanese rock band, last summer, and we had a really, really amazing time. I was in Indianapolis over the holiday break, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to sit down with Matt and do an interview, so I did. I'm currently back in my little farmhouse in Bishop, Georgia, back from my holiday travels. It's really, really good to be home. I realized this episode is a day late. I didn't realize it when I woke up this morning. I'm on holiday time. We drove all the way back from Indianapolis yesterday. I was thinking it was Friday. Turns out it was Saturday. Today is Sunday, so this should have been out 24 hours ago. My apologies, everybody. Also, I realized that there was no song explication this week. I hope I didn't disappoint anybody too much, but that was Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and it was just too much at my in-laws to pull out my guitar and put my microphone up on their kitchen table and just be a huge pain in the ass. So I'll either double up soon or I'll definitely knock one of those out this week. Hope nobody missed that too much. If this is your first episode of Crash and Ride is a long-form interview podcast where I talk to musicians who survived anxiety, depression, and addiction. The idea was that if we could have open and honest conversations about our suffering, whether it be from depression or anxiety or addiction or some other aspect of being a musician that was incredibly difficult and painful, and we could just tell the truth about it. Other musicians could hear it. We could learn to recognize our suffering and the sufferings of others, and we could all get better together. I've been a professional musician off and on my entire adult life, and I've known a lot of people in this business who just stuffed their negative emotions down so deep and suffered and suffered and suffered and either ended up miserable and alone and frightened. Oh, there's a new sound. I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a new sound in the background of the interviews I do here in my living room and the voiceovers I do in my living room. I have, this is such a digression. Please forgive this, those of you who are please just get to the interview. I have an old clock that belonged to my great-grandfather that has never run in the entire time that I've had it. And I had a friend over tonight who looked at it and went, did you wind both springs? And I didn't know there were two springs. And I wound the other spring, and now there's this 150-year-old clock on my mantle. I'm gonna disconnect this microphone and hold on a second. All right, hold on. I'm just gonna move this microphone across the living room. If I can do this without knocking every guitar in here over. Listen to this. So that is the sound of my grandparents' living room from when I was a child. It's super nostalgic for me, and I finally have this thing working. So now when I do interviews in my living room, you may hear this sort of quiet ticking of an ancient clock in the background. And then at the top of the hour, it'll ring the number of bells for the hour. And at the bottom of the hour, it just rings once. So every 30 minutes, there's a chime. And that's a sound that's really important to me. On a visceral, emotional level, it's the sound of my grandparents' house, which is was the greatest place in my life when I was little. So I hope nobody finds it irritating to have that in the background. Eventually, my hope is to move this whole operation out into my barn once I get that dried in, and I can set that up as a studio, and there won't be an ancient old mantle clock out there. But until then, I'm content to have a quiet ticking and the occasional bong sound in the background. So right, back to matters at hand. As I was saying, I've been a professional musician off and on my entire adult life. I have a big show coming up New Year's Eve. I'm playing with 5/8, the Athens power pop, post-punk, post-rock rock band that I've played with, forever. We're playing just before midnight. And also, earlier in the evening, I've talked about the amazing, incredibly young band Fishbug from Athens, Georgia. I have linked to their music several times from the podcast. I think they're phenomenal. They're all super young. In fact, if you add up the ages of the three people who will be in the band that I'm playing with them New Year's Eve, because their drummer is too young to get into this bar, I think. But if you added the ages up of the other three members, it still doesn't add up to how old I am. I'm really stoked. They're an amazing young band, and they asked me if I would fill in for their drummer. So I'll be playing with Fishbug New Year's Eve and 5/8 at the Nowhere Bar here in Athens, Georgia. It's right there on Lumpkin Street across from the Georgia Theater. It's going to be a good time. You should come down. Okay, here's a couple of quick announcements. Crash and Ride is brought to you in part by Greer Amplification. Greer Amps builds the best boutique effects pedals available. If you're looking for an overdrive, boost, fuzz, compressor, or tremolo that is rugged, road-tested, and at home, on stage, in the studio, or in your living room, Greer has a pedal for you. Nick and his staff strive to build the best products around with the best tone you've ever heard. They believe in their products, and they stand behind them too, backing each one up with a lifetime warranty to the original owner. Each Greer Amps product is hand-built in Athens, Georgia, USA. Go to www.greeramps.com or visit your favorite music retailer today. Hey, yesterday was Nick's birthday. If you go down to his shop, right now he's getting ready to fly out to Anaheim for the NAMM show, but for the next couple of days he'll be around the shop packing that big old crate. Go in there and wish him a happy birthday. Nick's a great guy. Crash and Ride is also brought to you by Jittery Joe's, a local coffee roaster based here in Athens, Georgia. They have a special espresso blend named after the podcast. You can get Crash and Ride espresso, whole bean or ground, from our website. Go to crashandridepodcast.com/store. We also have t-shirts up there, the blue and black t-shirts with the Crash and Ride logo and the Loud Guitars Save Lives slogan across the top. That was designed by our friend Scott Sosby, a phenomenal graphic designer based in New York City, also a lovely guy. Go to crashandridepodcast.com/store. So as I mentioned earlier, Matt Aaron, today's guest, is the singer, songwriter, guitar player in the fantastic Indianapolis band Endiana, spelled with an E. I've linked to some of their music in the show notes. He's also a great graffiti artist and fine art painter, and there's also a link to some of his work in the show notes. And also, when I got to his house, which is just jammed to the rafters with beautiful works of art, some of which is stuff that he's done, some of which is stuff that he's traded for or bought, but also in his studio, there are two mannequins. One of them is dressed in clothes that actually belong to Charles Manson, and one is dressed in the suit that Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker from California, the serial killer from California, he has the suit that Richard Ramirez was wearing when he was arrested. And he has some paintings by John Wayne Gacy and some artwork by Charles Manson, and I was just like, oh, okay, man, why? And we got into a discussion about that in the interview. He did a long-term, like 10 or 15-year art project where he was writing letters to incarcerated murderers about, not so much about the crimes and the violence, but just about regret and guilt and alienation, and compiled these letters, and he still has all of them. And he also ended up sort of purchasing a lot of this memorabilia to sort of augment his art collection. And it was not something I expected to run into the day after Christmas. Matt and I are both like super relaxed in this interview. As I was listening back and editing this interview, I was really struck at just how languid this conversation was. And that's due in part, I think, to the fact that like it was the day after Christmas and we were both kind of like two spent shotgun shells on the floor, like with all the holiday travel and anxiety and everything, like it was all done. And we were just completely empty of a potential, like, it was very relaxed, and it was a good day. The theme that sort of seems to emerge for me as I listen back to this interview is the single-mindedness with which Matt pursued art as a vocation from the time he was very young. Like, they sent him off to military school, and he just got out of there as fast as he could. And once he got to Indianapolis from small-town northern Indiana, all he did was art. That's all he's done. He's been a photographer, a painter, and a musician, and that's who he is. And over and over, he just makes the leap. Like he reaches out and makes the connection that he needs to in order to like continue to do creative work full time and to meet the people he wants to meet. That's part of his art project about the serial killer thing, but also he reaches out to friends of Basquiat and Keith Haring in New York that he wants to meet and hang out with, and he just makes it happen. We discovered completely by accident that we have a mutual friend, the phenomenal New York graffiti artist Jilly Ballistic, who he collaborates with on a regular basis. I like her work is hanging in his house. I took pictures of it. I sent it to her, and she's like, "Where the hell are you? Like, are you in Matt's house? How is that even possible? How do you know Matt?" It was this crazy coincidence, but like I recognized her work, and we talked about it. It was just like, Matt's a go-getter for such a quiet, low-key man. The like level of determination he's displayed from the time he was very young to do this one thing, be a creative professional, is remarkable, and it's quite a story. So yeah, let's jump into our interview with Matt Aaron. All right, I'm here with Matt Aaron in Indianapolis, Indiana. Matt is a fine art painter and guitar player, singer-songwriter with the band Endiana with an E. I'll put a link to Indiana in the show notes. Matt and I did some touring last summer. We played some shows together in Georgia, and I was really thrilled to meet him. And now I'm in his beautiful home, surrounded by all his amazing art collection. And thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I felt the same way about the time we spent together. I really enjoyed that and enjoyed your knowledge of Georgia so much. That was a treat.
Well, you came to Athens. It was summer break, or break between the quarters, and it was like Vanilla Sky Athens, which is always an interesting time to be there because it's often full, just absolutely to the roof with students, and then you come at a downtime and you get a whole different impression of the city.
Oh, it made it wonderful. It gave it a really nice small town feel, and we were able to go out and not run into tons of deviant behavior at night. It was we were the deviants.
Indiana has one full-length LP out, right?
Oh, we made a few records. I think we made, I don't know, because we like combined EPs a couple of times, where 2 EPs became an album for us. So maybe there's 3 records.
It's the 2 full-time members are you and Tim Fuller, the bass player.
Yeah. Who's
also a great harmony singer. And you guys go to Europe fairly frequently, don't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't do this without Tim. Tim's what keeps that thing moving. And yeah, I love Europe. We have some really great fans, especially in France. People who have really taken great care of us and invite us back, and they're wonderful to us there. So
it's funny to me because I knew you in that context. I met Tim. I was just up here. I saw him play one day and struck up a conversation with him, and then discovered Indiana through him, and primarily thought of you as a guitar player, a singer-songwriter, and yet now I'm in your home, and there is just so much beautiful art here on the walls.
Oh, thank you very much.
And also you've collaborated with my friend Jilly Ballistic in New York City. And I wish that people could see this. I'll probably snap a photo before I get out of here. But there's several of the collaborative pieces that Matt did with Jill on the walls here. And
I love Jilly so much. She's one of my favorite people. It's a strange small world. I run into a lot of people who say that they know her, or they're familiar with her work, and I'll tell you, she's one of the sweetest people in the world. She's so talented and a joy to work with, and that's that kind of relationship, almost like Tim and I, where it's hard to imagine doing that kind of work without the other person. It's a real cool team to get to work with Jilly.
She's super gutsy. Like she'll post up in a New York subway and do some paste art, and like
the idea of being a street artist is gutsy in and of itself. You have to, it's its own huge risk all the time, constantly. Not only the law, which, I mean, everybody's worried about getting pinched, but I often put up stuff in places where I shouldn't be, let alone I shouldn't be at night. And it's a way of claiming territory to some people. So it's a ballsy move to claim territory in all 5 boroughs, if you will. You know, to be all city in New York is really a huge thing, and she doesn't seem to have any problems with it. I talked to her a few times about getting started and the sort of tutorial who helped you out, who taught you how to do this kind of. And she's just an independent badass, and she takes huge risks, and she isn't afraid to use her voice, and that's what I love so much about her. Is she's so strong with her voice.
Also, it seems to me that street art, especially in New York City, is a profoundly sort of, if not anti-capitalist, then at least a protest against property being exclusively owned by people who don't really have any investment in the well-being of New Yorkers.
I love it that we're going to talk about this. The idea of street art for me is about advertising it, and it's my ability to take free space, or space that I pay for as a taxpayer, the walls that aren't being used. My ability to use that to advertise should be taken just as seriously as McDonald's or anybody else that comes and puts up those, movie posters. They plaster the wall, wheat paste them, just the same as I'm doing. People, and it's in all honesty, it's been a long time since I was really out defacing public property or anything like that. The galleries helped me to avoid doing non-commissioned work, and So,
when you say deface, I remember Jimi Hendrix on the Dick Cavett show right after the Woodstock thing, where he played the national anthem, and Dick Cavett sort of opens this line of questioning with him about it. He said some people thought it was disrespectful, and Jimmy looks genuinely surprised. He says, "Disrespectful, man? I thought it was beautiful."
Yeah. It's an amazing moment to see the surprised look on his face in that scene, where he's the audacity of saying that's being disrespectful, defacing something. I want to think that street art makes the ugly buildings around town look a little better, or I hear positive reviews about the pieces I put up, so nobody's ever complaining about the pieces I put up, at least not to me. So I'm sure that happens. I'm sure it happened a lot when I was a kid. But that's the learning process of
I've seen some of your stencil work too. There's like a ballerina or something that is a recurring.
Oh yeah, I did this thing called Blind Tourist Broken Teeth, which is about being in, because of being a musician, the tours put me in tons of cities that I wouldn't go to otherwise. And I'm in major city after major city, and I have the ability to put my art up in all those kind of areas. There's always a high street or whatever, that kind of college kind of area in an entertainment district in a city, or in the big cities. And to search those places out and find those, I end up in those kind of seedy neighborhoods, and late at night trying to avoid, getting caught for putting art up. And like I said, you're in a dangerous situation. And so Blind Tourist is about not even knowing where I'm at, ending up in these weird places and putting up artwork, and it's like a forward cautionary tale, like to pay attention about your surroundings, or else you pay the consequences for it. So it's a lesson for me to remember, and something I can share a little bit because of my experience in travel.
Where did you grow up?
In Indiana. I've lived here most of my life. I lived in a small town called Marion, Indiana, which I don't have any stories to tell you about Marion. I don't remember it very well. Nothing ever happened there. So I got sent to military school when I was 15.
What was that about?
I think my parents wanted me to be proficient in like math, or in like in things that I wasn't interested in, and I think they thought that the military would dissuade me from being artistic and make me focus on more substantial things, more tangible things.
Was there like a series of incidents that led up to them? Were there like threats of like, we're sending you off to military school or anything like that?
Yeah, of course. They told me before those threats seem so like impossible. You know, it's like, you know, like your parents don't really send you away. They really do.
Yeah,
some people's parents really will send you away.
I was at Oak Ridge Military Academy when I was younger, so I met a lot of kids whose parents were just like, that's it.
You know, in all fairness, maybe I was defiant enough to look the threat of that, or to, you know, in the face and kind of keep trying. You know, I don't know. Military school taught me a lot of things. So
You were 15?
yeah, when they sent me to a summer camp there before school. Like, I think maybe to make sure I'd survive. I was very small, and I had a smart mouth. Yeah. I was a short kid. 4.5 feet tall. You know, I was a short kid. I didn't weigh 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of sending me to military school was probably a little daunting to my mom. But my father saw the disciplinary potential in it.
What did they do, your parents?
My dad's in banking, and my mom's a housewife. She has raised my 4 sisters and I.
Yeah. You have 4 sisters.
Yeah.
What's the age?
I have 1 older sister, and then all the others are younger than me.
Yeah.
They're all smart, beautiful, successful women. Doctors, and, you know, yeah.
Are they in Indy, or?
No. I have 1 sister who lives here in Indy.
Yeah.
They're doing very well. All my sisters are wonderful people.
And so there was this sort of gradual darkening of the clouds of, like, if you keep this up, Matthew, you're going off to get your head shaved and carry a rifle. And
yeah, and that seemed impossible to me. I didn't really think that was something that was possible. So I probably continued to be defiant and do the things that I was doing. And
was it like smoking pot, skipping class, that kind of stuff?
no, it wasn't really that bad. I probably didn't, it was probably skipping class or not paying attention in school, not carrying the GPA that they wanted me to carry. I don't know, like, I would draw all the time. I was making art all the time and not studying, not memorizing history, or figuring out trigonometry. I didn't care about that stuff, and I knew I wasn't gonna care about it in the future.
Yeah.
No matter what, no matter what, I wasn't going to change my mind and care about math down the road. And people kept saying, you're gonna need this, you're gonna need this. So I refused to need it my whole life. I just never gave up on refusing to need math.
Yeah.
And this is where I landed. Art, has saved my life for my whole life.
Yeah. I remember planning my senior year so that I knew exactly which day I could stop trying and still graduate from high school. It drove everyone absolutely insane in my family, all the teachers, because I was a gifted student on paper.
Yeah.
I tested well. I imagine you probably had a similar experience.
More articulate, bright young men who carry ourselves fine and blend in fine. My parents had me blending into society to the best of their possible, they were doing their best to make sure everybody thought that I was a good kid. And that, that meant that I was going to be an articulate, well-spoken, upstanding member of society. And that was their plan.
Right.
I don't think graffiti artist or... that's what Forbes magazine called me, a graffiti artist this year.
How did you end up in Forbes magazine?
They wrote this awesome review of some of my work, but that was the type, Matthew Aaron, graffiti artist. Like, oh shit. That's not exactly the way I had this planned out.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah. Right. Finally, my dad's going to read some article about me and be in Forbes, and that's so, that's awesome. What a successful, but graffiti artist.
Did you struggle with depression or anxiety as a young person?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't remember dealing with it that way, or realizing that I was dealing with anything like that. The challenges of daily life living in a military school will hold your attention.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to worry about anything else, because that's all you are going to worry about.
It's very focusing. What's interesting though is as we were talking before I turned the microphones on, you were talking about building canvases. As I'm sitting here in Matt's living room, I can look across and see some brand new blank canvases, and we were talking about when you hand build them and you have to put hospital corners on the corners, and I was thinking, I know that term from making my bunk in military school.
For sure. For sure.
You crawl up underneath and pull it tight.
It's the same thing. That's how I learned how to wrap a canvas. It's the same kind of corner that I work with anyway. I guess there's lots of techniques.
So did you finish up high school at military school?
No, I turned 18. and I finished up in a vocational school.
What were you studying there?
High school. Getting out of high school. That was my only goal. Accomplishing that. But I was working a normal job and trying to stay alive, pay my own bills, because I was 18 and I was gone.
Yeah.
There was no way I was going to do that year in military school, like no more. So as soon as I hit 18, I just bailed.
Did you finish high school?
In a vocational school.
So you did graduate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
was its own challenge, I didn't want to. I never wanted to do any of that. I never wanted to go to school. I never wanted to be forced to do anything. You know what I mean?
No, I totally.
I just wanted to make art, and people didn't understand that. And now I think there's an idea that different people learn different ways, and you can focus people in a way and see potential. No one looked at you that way, or looked at kids that way in the early 80s. No one was going, oh, he's
a kinesthetic learner. Or
no one cared at all that, and maybe they had the best intentions, but it's a different world now than it was then. And I saw this great thing the other day that was some teacher had figured out a way to show their students how to do fractions with Legos, and just like a regular Lego brick is 8 little connection points. So that's 1, and then there's a 4 connection point piece, and that's 1/2, and the corner piece. There's like, I played with Legos my whole life. Had anyone ever showed it to me that way, I would have been able to comprehend it. But on the chalkboard, it never made that much sense to me. I'm a really visual learner, and I'm a hands-on person, so. There weren't a lot of really understanding people at my military school going, oh, you need to show him with Legos.
Yeah, I think that the military school experiences that I had, there's basically 2 tracks. There's people who grasp things the normal way, and then people who just need to be shouted at. And that's kind of the 2-tiered approach to...
That seemed to be the only methods that they knew how to teach at the school I went to.
Then you got out.
Got away.
When did you pick up guitar?
I'd already tried. Like when I was a kid, I was in love with the idea of Bruce Springsteen. Like I thought he was just the coolest. I thought that was the coolest life you could ever live, was to be Bruce Springsteen. I saw Bruce when I was 12 in 1984 here in Indy, and it was the Born in the USA tour, and
I was in military school at that point. I remember hearing Born in the USA on the radio one morning while I was getting my room ready to be inspected.
That's funny. You know, when I got to military school, the first song I heard on campus was Welcome to the Jungle. And it was my introduction to military school and the music there. That's crazy. But I loved Springsteen. I was such a huge fan. I think my parents thought that music was a discipline that maybe would help focus me. But I didn't like learning. I didn't like practicing. I didn't like the guy who they picked to teach me guitar. I didn't like the songs that he wanted to teach me. I sound like the most it's like, never work with Matt. He doesn't like you.
It sounds like a big square peg childhood.
It was just really awkward for me.
Yeah.
I found guitar personally when I was writing, and it was a way for me to write better. And I was playing cowboy chords that I taught myself in that kind of G, C, D thing, you know, just like...
You can go a long way with GCD.
Indiana was a lot of Indiana is based around the three chords and the truth kind of idea. I don't know how else to explain guitar than Bruce Springsteen. I was just trying to write. I was just trying to be a songwriter. I just thought that was, if you could just sing songs and be super cool, that's all you had to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder than that, but
yeah.
But I learned that from Bruce too. You know, I watched Bruce's marriage just fall apart on the road, and I saw his friends pass away. I learned a lot by watching what happened to Bruce Springsteen over the years.
Have you read Born to Run?
Nope.
I just finished that like 3 weeks ago.
Is it amazing? Everything that guy touches is heartwarming. It's
good. It really delves into some of the struggles with anxiety and depression that he sort of inherited from his dad. That's sort of the through line through the whole book, is how much he struggled to sort of reconcile who he was through his perception of his father, which I thought was Bruce is a lot crazier than I gave him credit for being. Like, his level of obsession to detail and his level of ability to fall into melancholy, it surprised me for someone who's as successful as he is. But on reflection, like, that's kind of the level of detail you have to give any work that is going to be valid, is you have to really fret over it.
It exposes a lot about him. He shows how sad he is so often in his work. And the character studies that he does, the way that he writes about people, I feel like I know most of the characters in his songs. Mm-hmm. And I think they're just little parts of him. That's the kind of that's where I see insight in songwriting, is in character studies and what you would decide to tell about other people. I think oftentimes that reflects what you want people to tell about you. Bruce has a neat way of doing it.
Yeah. You stayed here in Indy after getting out of vocational school and started playing in bands, I'm guessing.
No, I ran here. Marion was a small town, and I was 18, and I was out of military school, which was way up north, but almost by Michigan, and I didn't have... it's not like my parents were like, "Oh yeah, come stay with us. It'll be we'll have a wonderful time."
Yeah.
So Indy was the big city, and Broad Ripple, the little area of Indianapolis that I live in at the time, especially, was a music mecca for Indiana. It's where everybody was coming and everybody was playing. There were 8 different bars maybe on that one street where everybody could play constantly. So I came up here to watch bands play, and we came here to skateboard, and there were graffiti people here, there were homeless people here, there was all kinds of stuff I had just never seen before when I came here. I fell in love, so I moved here, and slowly over the years the city's changed so much, and especially my little village has changed a ton, and it's not what it used to be, and the music scene isn't what it used to be, and Maybe music isn't what it used to be.
I think that's a discussion that we have a lot on this podcast, just about how the shift to streaming has changed your sort of vocational opportunities as a player, but has also been incredibly democratizing. For the technology has allowed people to get music out there that wouldn't normally be out there. Just don't expect to make a plush living off of it, you know.
There was so much romance to Springsteen. That's what I loved about it. There was so much, like that outfit, that leather jacket with the denim thing and the bandana. It's like he would always be in that. Mm-hmm. It's like he would never actually break character. The guy never actually had to do normal shit in his day-to-day life. He was just writing songs and playing them for 15,000 people at a time who were, you know, fawning over him. There was no downtime, and that was awesome. And that was true with Alice Cooper. You know, I didn't know Alice Cooper played golf. You know what I mean? Alice Cooper lived in eye makeup, and he had a snake around him every time I ever saw him. And now those days are so over. You know, like there's so much exposure, and there's to build a character. And I think that was such a great part of rock and roll in its best moments, was that you could have heroes. There were characters. There were people, you know, bigger than life. People Kiss, you know, or there was any, you know, Alice Cooper was awesome. That's such a neat thing. Or what was left to your imagination was so intriguing about rock stars, and the idea of what backstage looked like, all that kind of it was so wonderful. And that's all the curtain's been lifted, and we see what it all is now, and you're gonna break character. You know, you can't stay in character all the time. And I think we see, like, we just watched that guy who testified against everybody. What's his name? Like 6ix9ine?
Tekashi 6ix9ine.
Yeah, there's breaking character, right? Like when you're like,
right.
Yeah, I'm in a gang and I'm really super hardcore. You know, that the idea of being a businessman in the entertainment world is its own challenge. It's super hard to be successful in the entertainment industry.
Right.
The idea of doing it under the cover of a character today is outrageous.
I think it benefits certain personalities. Like you have the Amanda Palmers of the world. Is that her name? She was in Dresden Dolls, and then now she's her own sort of one-woman industry. And she's constantly got some Kickstarter up or another, or Patreon presence, where she's like, if you just give me a little more money, we can do this other thing. And it caused quite a bit of controversy, certainly in a lot of indie rock circles. Like she got $1 million Patreon money, and it was then asking people to play for free, and it
the hustle, right?
She's naturally, like, I have my own opinions about it, but I understand that other people have different opinions, and we're all on different pages about it. But like, it just seemed like it suited her personality to be constantly out there, like banging a gong for her own sort of material well-being. Whereas, a lot of singer-songwriters aren't that extroverted, and certainly aren't that comfortable being so overtly self-promotional.
The idea of doing all that extra stuff, it's hard enough to write good songs.
Yeah.
And it's super hard to get people to listen to your songs. Maybe all that other stuff is a way to get people to listen to your songs. That's not a fight I'm willing to go through.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the early days in Broad Ripple. You had bands here?
Not really. I was working as a photographer. I just always been artistic. I'd always been in that scene. I was making record covers for the local bands, and I got freelance jobs when I first started moving here. When I first started here, I would work as a stringer for the entertainment papers and do this photography thing. I went out and did a ton of dates with the Bare Naked Ladies, and like maybe that was 95. Went across the country with them as a photographer with them, and like when I came back after that sort of tour or whatever, the people that I met here along the way were all so impressed that I had gone out to do that it got me a whole bunch more jobs.
Yeah.
And ultimately I got a job with, like Clear Channel Entertainment or Sunshine Promotions, all these big companies here that were booking the major concert industry. So I shot photographs for, what was Deer Creek and the Murat, and all these places have other names now, but
yeah,
corporate.
Are they
corporate
like
names?
Big performance venues? Is that what?
Yeah, Deer Creek is the Verizon Wireless Music Center. It's been so many different things. I don't know what it is now. I think it's named after an insurance company or something. But yeah, it's a 16,000 seats or something like that with a big lawn and a huge concert venue. So I worked for everybody over those years, from Aerosmith to ZZ Top are in my portfolio. I worked with Ray Charles and Willie Nelson, and huge names, taking their photographs and then making them available for promotional stuff, and I don't know, tons of different photography work. So I was a photographer when I first was in Indy, and I did that for years, and it must have been 99. And in December of 98, I lost a really close friend to suicide, and a few of his friends and I made a band afterwards. My first band was called Trainwreck.
Who was that?
Who was in Trainwreck, or
who was
my
your
friend that died?
Yeah.
Scott Quinn was a promoter here in town. He worked with a lot of the local musicians and built a lot of the music scene that became Broad Ripple in the 90s, I guess. Yeah, he died in 98, in December of 98, and he's buried around the corner.
Was he just struggling with depression, or?
Yeah, and he's also in entertainment, a musician, and the complex realities of being determined to live that life and needing to pay bills and live a real life too. We were young, but I was just working as a photographer. I got to know a ton of people in the city, so I built this band after Scott passed away, and it sprouted it took off, and we got great gigs, and we opened up for awesome people, and the band only lasted about a year before it imploded. I think Trainwreck was aptly named. We were all drinking, and we were all dealing with the loss of our friend anyway, and writing just debaucherous rock and roll. But the song God Bless Rock and Roll was actually, that's a Trainwreck song that Indiana still performs.
Yeah, I love that song. I think I put that on one of the Crash and Ride playlists a few months ago.
I think we played it together. I think you played it with us
in Atlanta.
In Atlanta. I think you came up on stage and played with us, and we played that. That was originally a Trainwreck song, and faster and kind of a Rolling Stones sort of presentation. So I was in Trainwreck for about a year, and after that I worked on recording, tried to make some projects that were like multi-track recording and layers of noise. A project called Sadie Mae Glutz.
Wasn't she a Manson family member?
Yeah, it was a prison alias for Susan Atkins.
Yeah. She had a son named Zizo Zozie Zadrak, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I wonder where he is these days. I'm sure
he was adopted and changed his name, and nobody knows, as far as I know. Somebody knows, but not me.
Somebody knows.
Yeah.
Somebody knows. I wonder where that guy is. That's a tough name.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's hard to pitch that.
Yeah.
But maybe it's sort of, nobody forgets it either.
So you were doing this noise project named after Sadie Mae Glutz.
And some radio people liked it, but we couldn't tour. It was like, there was no way to tour. It was me and this other guy named Russ, and we were just like sitting in a room, you know, recording nickels on a counter, or like ripping pages out of a phone book, and like it was just all this noise, but stacked and layered appropriately. It sounded beautiful, and we ended up making something that was really neat. And it was the early days of internet radio, and man, I think the station was called Woxy, WOXY, out of Cincinnati, and maybe they were originally WKRP.
Oh yeah.
And then Woxy was like the internet version of it. Anyway, it's some station like that. I can't remember the details, but I think that's it. Fell in love with my little recording project, and they started spinning us, and I think we had like 6 or 7 songs in a rotation at one time, and it was really fun, but there was no way to tour it. It was just an art project I made. And then Indiana with Tim. And that was my friends, you know, that was just like finally an opportunity to do something there wasn't any pressure about, and it wasn't pretentious. Finally, it was just,
yeah,
let's just play music and have fun and make songs. And we got to practice the first night, and I think we played like Use Me Up or something like that, you know, just like
the Bill Withers tune?
Yeah, just to like blow the dust off, you know, try and figure out what we were going to do. And we hadn't discussed anything, so we played that, and then all laughed at each other because we didn't know what else we were going to do. So I think Tim said, you know, let's just do some of the songs that you wrote over the years. Let's try some stuff out. And he had played bass. He played bass with us a couple of times, like filled in emergency situations in Trainwreck. We had our own weird dynamics in the early days of our friendship. But he played bass with us a couple of times, and so he knew the songs, and it's a small enough community, so he had watched what happened along the way.
Somewhere in here you made some pretty deep connections to the New York art community too.
Yeah, well, those are my heroes, you know. It's an interesting thing. I was watching this documentary. That's so weird. Maybe that's my discipline. Maybe this is a good story of how I became disciplined from military school, going after what I wanted. I was watching this documentary about an artist that I loved named Jean-Michel Basquiat, and he was working in New York in the 80s and passed away, died of a heroin overdose, sort of at the peak of his fame. And this documentary was a bunch of his friends, his co-workers or colleagues over the years, and they were all telling stories about him. And one of them was a guy named Albert Diaz, who had worked on the Samo project with Jean-Michel. Samo was a graffiti project. I'd had a little bit of a history as a graffiti artist anyway. So I felt some connection to that sort of thing. But Samo was an awesome graffiti project in the very beginning of graffiti, when it first started in New York City. And they were writing these little short poems that no one could figure out who was doing it. And it was like the intrigue of Banksy in the early days in this art scene in New York.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Al Diaz was talking about his time with Jean and what they had done together. And he's he seemed approachable. He seemed like an easy guy to get to know. The kind of guy you could have a beer with or drink coffee with or whatever. So I just hit that dude up. I searched him out and found him on the internet. And I told him I wanted to work with him. Told him I wanted to meet him. Ask him for an autograph. I asked him for an autograph paint can. And he was like, well, you're an artist. You have access to some art supplies. You send me some paint and I'll send you a can. So I drop shipped him paint right then. Right. Right. Okay, sure thing. So I sent him some paint and he said, all right, cool. I'll sign a can and send you a can. It's sitting behind you.
Oh.
And so we sent it back. It only took a few days. And I was like, holy cow, man. I just went from watching a documentary to now I know this guy. I can talk to him. I can ask him the questions about Jean that I want to know. Man, within a year we were super close friends. He comes here and stays at my house. I go there and stay at his place. We've made 50 paintings together, tons and tons of art projects, and we've made murals together. He's watched out for me while I put work up in the subways in New York, which was a huge goal for me, and to have Samo looking out for me while I'm doing it is, I don't know, it's like playing with Springsteen.
Yeah.
These were the people that influenced me the most. So it's not that I don't have discipline. It's not that I'm not driven. It's not that I don't work well with other people. It's that I want to do it on my own terms, and not doing it on my terms gives me anxiety.
Yeah. Do you have you ever thought about whether or not you have ADHD or ADD? Or?
I'm sure I fall somewhere on that. The spectrum seems so broad now that I think everybody falls somewhere on.
Yeah.
But I feel embraced by the spectrum. I think the idea that there are different people and people are fundamentally different. Mm-hmm. Is important.
Well, I think the spectrum shouldn't exist as a means of branding people as like with a new scarlet letter, but it should be considered as a way of figuring out how to adapt systems to benefit the greatest number of people caught up in them. Like for a student to be, for someone to say to a parent, like your kid has ADHD or dyslexia, is to say, and we're going to figure out how to accommodate them, not as a way of shunning them,
Yeah.
Ideally.
The idea of accommodating is certainly comforting, right? Like that's what we all want, is to think that it's going to work better. But just the idea of you fit somewhere helps.
Yeah.
Somewhere, somewhere there's somebody worse than you, there's somebody that's not quite as bad. But for whatever that does, it gives you a line, so you at least have someone to your immediate left and to your immediate right, and that keeps you from feeling so isolated in your own head.
Yeah, well, as I sort of calling back to something I said earlier about the square peg childhood, a square peg's only a liability in a round hole. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Somewhere there's a square hole.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, for me, my theory as I've gotten older is that laziness is a myth for the most part, especially in children. But a lot of it has to do with adaptability and the ability to thrive in different circumstances. Like a lot of us who got, in your case, sent off to military school, in my case, spending a ton of time in detention and just like nearly failing out of high school, was that I wasn't properly motivated to perform in a system that I felt like was in no way set up for my style of learning or adapting or living.
Right. Exactly. And feeling that way, that, you know, this is all, none of this was built for me.
Right.
None of this is, am I supposed to, you know, that is isolating. It puts you out, it pushes you away even further.
Right. But now look at your adult life. You've had this like photographer, painter, collage artist, guitar player, singer, songwriter. Like, I mean, that's not a...
I'm a creator. I'm just an artistic person. I'm just... That's all I can do without being uncomfortable. Any sort of other structure doesn't work for me. I work out of my own house because I don't want to be forced to decide now is the time that I'm going to work. And as a result, instead of screwing off in my 9-to-5 job, avoiding work, I don't mind putting in 60 or 80 hours a week doing this, where I'm actually productive. I'm creative. Whatever successful is, it's working. You know what I mean? Like it's, so I go from maybe working 18 hours to jumping at the opportunity to work 80 hours a week.
Yeah. I just remember a day in my early 20s where I was packing up from one band practice to go to my second or third of the day, and remarked to someone that I felt like I had to work extra hard now because I had been lazy my whole life, because I had internalized all of that criticism from adults in my life. Yeah. And it was a guy named Rob Carter, who's also a visual artist, lives in Austin, Texas. He kind of caught a hold of my shirt and was like, hey, dude, you're the least lazy person I've ever met. Yeah, the guy going to his third practice of the day. Exactly. It takes an amazing amount of drive, and anyone that you know that's a successful musician, artist, entertainer in any capacity, anyone who's successful, you can't be lazy. There's no way to... You have to be driven. You have to be motivated in order to happen in front of that many people, because it just doesn't happen on its own. You have to go get it. I just have a tremendous amount of compassion for young people who are caught up and getting ground up in that machinery, thinking that there's something wrong with them because they're not able to thrive in traditional work structures and class and school structures and stuff. And I feel like people like you are such a great lighthouse for someone who's at this point, like, then this college thing isn't working for me, or this high school thing isn't working for me. And then, you've had this adult life of tremendous creative success. But, I feel like that everyone's got the thing that they need to motivate them, but so many people just have had it beaten out of them. Right. It's what you're willing to risk everything for. That's the only accomplishment that I've ever been able to achieve, was things that I would give everything. I have nothing. If I'm not an artist, I have nothing. So I would give anything back to continue that. That's how you accomplish anything. Any goal that you want to get. I think you have to be willing to risk it all. And that's where I'm at with art. I'm willing to risk everything to be an artist. What's your work week like now? I know you just came back from New York, where you were doing a collaboration with Jill and Al, and there was the Forbes article. Like, you're doing gallery shows, or? Yeah, I'm represented by Evan Lurie Gallery in Carmel.
Indiana.
Is that Evan Lurie from the Lounge Lizards?
No, I don't think so. The Lurie brothers are in the entertainment industry. They were actors. I don't know if Evan was in a...
It's the Lounge Lizards with John Lurie, singer, songwriter, poet, painter, now living somewhere, I think, in the...
Yeah, I think John Lurie is somehow related to... There's Bruce, and there's a whole family of Luries, and they're all involved in the art world. It's my understanding that both Jean-Michel Basquiat and Andy Warhol were at one time represented by the Lurie brothers. So these are... this is my... that's the gallery where I hang, and they show my work, and they're wonderful people, but I don't spend a ton of time in a gallery.
Probably for the best.
I take art up there,
drop it off.
Yeah. So I don't spend a lot of time there. I make murals a ton. So I painted, I think 3 murals last week. I did a residential barn, like some people's barn for them, and I did a tattoo parlor, and a distillery, a liquor place. So I painted a few murals last week. I made a handful of canvases last week. I made a few paintings. I took on a commission last week. So which is making a painting for someone else that they have a vision for. Trying to understand someone else's vision is a compromise artistically that is maybe easier for me to make with paint than it is for me to make as a musician.
Yeah.
So it's something I do from time to time, and maybe having one right now is a good example of how willing I am to try and understand other people's idea of what's going to be pretty or livable. If I had any idea of what other people thought was good, I'd make that. But
yeah, I think that whole concept of trying to midwife someone else's vision into the world is one I enjoy as a drummer and as a studio engineer. I wouldn't call myself a producer. I'd be flattering myself, but that I think it's probably somewhat similar. Someone brings you an idea and you shape the final product to hopefully meet their expectations through the set of skills you've developed over the years.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges in just the communication, let alone the mechanics of your artistic endeavor, whatever you have to actually do with your hands. Understanding what someone's explaining artistically is its own challenge, because I think you have a preconceived thing that's hard to get rid of, and so do they, and
right.
And somewhere in the overlap, you hope to get as many of your ideas across as you can, but it's a challenge.
Do you mostly work in spray lacquer, or do you also use?
I do still use spray paint, aerosol paint, but I use house paint most of the time. Like cans of Sherwin-Williams.
Yeah. It is a little harder to sneak a 5-gallon bucket of Sherwin-Williams out of the subway, though.
There's some tricks. I know some tricks. Frankly, it's easier for me to use house paint outside than it is to use spray paint. Rattle cans are rattle cans because they make a whole lot of noise. And they smell a whole lot. So people can smell you from a block away. Nobody can smell you when you're using house paint. And it's silent. I can use a roller or a brush, and it's easier to hide it if you're in that kind of situation. And like I said, anymore I don't find myself in a lot of like breaking the law kind of situations. I still do it for fun from time to time, but even in that, I go to places where I know I'm welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, New York City Transit cops have beaten some spray paint kids nearly to death.
Yeah, New York's a challenge. New York's scary. A lot of these places are scary. I mean, you're talking about major cities. You're talking about places, downtown, or at least right in the center of the city. And it's places where people are out late at night. That's where it's going to get seen. So that's where you got to go. There's a lot of natural rivals to that lifestyle.
Yeah. Did you feel like you had to do some tagging in New York City though to accomplish? Was that like an internal milestone for you? Was that something like, oh, I've done this now?
Well, it's probably comparable to, I want to play CBGBs. I want to play, you know what I mean? Like, there's just some stages you're trying to get to in your life. There's some pinnacles or some plateaus that seem, painting in Europe is huge. Like, being able to paint in London was an enormous goal. Painting in LA was an enormous goal. Painting on the New York City subway system that's like the place. That's like the Plymouth Rock of the whole thing.
Right.
There's no, and people are looking for you, so it's a challenge. There's a team of people in New York that's all they do is look for bad kids doing bad things in the subway systems. This sort of scars and defacing of the subways is a rite of passage. I didn't set out to be a deviant. I wasn't trying to be bad, but
I mean, I think you were born to it. It sounds like
it came very natural.
Yeah.
It came much more natural than being good.
It seems like though that you've been able to.
But I wasn't being bad. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody.
Right. But it seems like you were fairly successful at rectifying your internal sense of your internal moral compass, right, wrong, good, bad, with the expectations of society. Sometime after military school, you figured out, like, okay, that's their world. This is my world.
You realize what you get in trouble for. You realize that there's trouble, and you realize that the trouble that you get into in that world is different than in the real world, right? Like, the immediate ramifications, physical ramifications of doing something wrong in military school are a lot different than, upsetting your parents on a Thursday night. So the challenges of the whole thing, I don't know, terrible.
The balance of self-acceptance is the thing I'm sort of driving at. Like, at some point you realize, like, I internalized a lot of the exterior criticism of me as a lazy person, like as a not fitting in, not being productive in the sort of terms that were set out by my high school teachers. Dogged me well into adulthood until there was a day somewhere on the road, probably in the Midwest, doing 220 shows a year. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm not a lazy.
Right.
This is
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, there's a huge relief to that. There's a huge. First of all, there's a cliff, right? There's a day when you go, screw it. I'm not gonna do 9 to 5. I'm not gonna work for somebody else. I can't do that. I just can't do it anymore. So when you're willing to jump off the cliff and go, fuck it, this either works or it doesn't work.
Right.
That's what I meant. Like, I'm willing to die for this. I'll give everything I have. If I end up starving to death because I was trying to be an artist, then to me, that's the most glorious way to ever go.
Hey, Crash and Ride would like to let you know about a new industry-wide initiative focused on mental health called Backline. Backline is a hub for artists, industry professionals, and their families to quickly and easily access mental health and wellness resources. Backline has partnered with leading support organizations and care providers to streamline access to services specifically geared towards the music industry. Go to www.backline.care to get the support you need to thrive, both on and off the road. The way that Backline works is that you call, you identify yourself as a musician in crisis, and they assign you a caseworker. The caseworker that you're assigned is familiar with healthcare resources in your area. So if you call from Georgia or Tennessee or Colorado or California or Wisconsin, they're going to have resources they can plug you in your community. So if you're struggling, don't hesitate to go to www.backline.care. Now, if you happen to be in the Athens, Georgia area and you're in crisis, I would highly suggest you reach out to NutriSpace. NutriSpace is a non-profit musicians resource based in Athens, Georgia, dedicated to suicide prevention and depression treatment for musicians. NutriSpace has an incredibly caring and dedicated staff whose only mission is to help you as a musician get the help that you need to thrive. NutriSpace has saved hundreds of lives, including my own. You walk in, you tell them you're having trouble, you fill out a few forms, and then they find you subsidized counseling so you can go and sit down and talk to somebody at the cost of like $15 or $20 an hour. It's an incredible deal. It's incredibly helpful. Go to nuci.org, that's nuci.org, or call NutriSpace at 706-227-1515. And finally, if you're somewhere else in the country and you're struggling with anxiety and depression, you're contemplating self-harm, you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. It's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. They have trained volunteers to help you through your crisis. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255, or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. All right, let's jump back into our interview with Matt Aaron. Was there a period of time where your economic situation was precarious enough that you were actually... were you ever homeless? Were you ever hungry?
Yeah, absolutely. I was homeless when I left school.
Yeah.
I fought and fought to get to have an apartment. I fought and fought. Every bit of it's been a challenge. And to consider that taking photographs or making paintings or playing my guitar and singing songs to people has kept me from being homeless I'm eternally grateful. That's all there is. I'm going to pay that back for the rest of my life and devote everything I am to that. You have to. When you make that big jump into devoting your life to your craft, right? Oof. Right. Man, that is a scary, scary place to be.
I remember the phone call where I called my folks and was like, I'm quitting school to play music. And it was not a happy call.
Yeah, no one's ever celebrating your arrival into manhood.
Right.
Oh, you've finally done it. We were hoping you would commit.
It was all about fear on their part. Like they were just worried I was going to end up kind of going through what I went through. They didn't want me to suffer, but I was prepared to suffer.
Well, everyone said, this won't work. You can't. No one's successfully, making paintings. Van Gogh sold one painting in his life. What are you going to... You're not as good as Van Gogh. You can't sell more paintings than Van Gogh sold.
Right.
And, it was an earring or a long hair. Every little plateau in my life, everything that I was trying to express, every expression I tried to make was being stifled along the way when I was a kid, whether it was through Catholic school leading up to, my elementary education or military school saying absolutely not, all those things were no along the way. I grew up in a barracks, so I wasn't allowed to hang art in my room. So And then I didn't have a home, so I didn't have any place to hang art. So now I'm obsessed with hanging art. There's art all over my house. There's, you know, I cover my spaces with imagery, because that's what worked for me. That was where I found some warmth in the whole thing. That's the only thing that ever really gave me a sense of accomplishment, was making art. So embracing, and you know, having it embrace me today is the reward for it. Getting to live in a house that's full of art is the culmination of all that effort that people were saying was impossible. You know, like, oh, it's 1 in a million. They were like, it's like trying to make it in the NBA. You know, you have better chances of being a basketball superstar, you know. Not really, because I'm, like I said, I was 4.5 feet tall and I weighed 100 pounds. So all those people who were saying I had a better chance of being like a pro athlete or the president, you know, to discourage kids from art in the name of your own fears as an adult, as the parent. I'm a parent too. I want the best for my kid. I don't want her to struggle. I don't want her to be faced with the challenges of fucking life.
Yeah.
I don't want her to have to suffer at all. I want her to have all the money she ever needs. I want everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I want her to be happy.
I get that.
Most of all, I want her to be happy. And if that means all I want her to do is do what she wants to do, then who am I to say anything other than that, you know? Because that's all I do.
A lesson that Gen X took away from boomer parents was like, I really only want my kid to be happy ever. Like, that's just number one.
Yeah. Well, it didn't seem to be like priority number one for my parents.
No, exactly.
My parents wanted me to be a reflection of them. Right. And that wasn't an obtainable goal for me.
Yeah. Well, man, I usually wind these interviews up with 10 questions that are sort of roughly based on the Inside the Actor Studio questions that were actually originally came from a French radio host named Bernard Bivot, but I've come up with my own questions. If you're ready, we can jump into that.
Yeah, cool. Is it like fast questions? You're going to ask me speed stuff?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
No.
I can take 10 questions, sure.
Okay. First question, what is the fondest memory you have of a meal that you've had?
Oh, man. Len and I ate at Bread Street, which is one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants in London, and we had beef Wellington. So we had Chef Ramsay's beef Wellington in London at Bread Street. And it was probably the happiest I've ever seen Lynn. So for me, that's the biggest one.
Yeah. Second question, what is the most frightened you've ever been?
I fell off a mountain in Arizona. I had been married and divorced in a really, really, really short period of time. And I, instead of going on a honeymoon, I went on a road trip with this death metal band to Arizona. And I went and photographed their band, and in the mornings I would wake up super early and go hiking in the desert, rock climbing, something I had done my whole life. And I was climbing not even a big mountain, but a Mount Papago in Flagstaff, Arizona, and made a terrible miscalculation and fell. And really, I thought I was going to die from what happened to me. It was a hard recovery. So falling off a mountain was probably the most scared I've ever been.
How badly were you hurt?
I was hurt badly.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any sort of insurance. I've always been an independent artist. I didn't have any money saved up. I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to end up, sweeping up the hospital to pay off medical bills in Arizona. So we were trying to kind of mend me up out of a drugstore.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
So I have big scars that were closed up with butterfly bandages, and I reset my own fingers, and I spent months on a couch healing up. It was a rough time. But just a couple of seconds in there was the most scared I've ever been.
Well, I've talked to, as a mountain biker and a guy who's spent some time, falling off mountains, I always talk about that moment where you're going over the handlebars and you think, oh, man, I just didn't enjoy not being hurt enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a moment where you realize you've been ungrateful and you're about to fucking pay.
Uh-huh. It's amazing how much of the desert you can get into your body when you cut enough of it open.
Oh man!
So I was picking sand out of my body for years.
I had an ex-girlfriend once take one of those body brushes to get all the gravel out of my back. That wasn't any fun.
No,
I was in the tub. We thought that would make it easier. I don't remember it. It was awful.
So they take me back to this house that this death metal band that lives in Arizona owns, and the band that I was with was friends with.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's like 8 dudes who are in death metal bands, like hairy, bearded dudes, right? There's like 8 of those guys sitting around this house, and me. And it's fucking 8 o'clock in the morning or something when I get back, and I'm just falling off the mountain, and I'm bloody mess, and I go in to get in the shower to clean up.
Yeah, sounds familiar. Yeah.
And all these hairy fuckers had clogged the drain, so the water's pooling at my feet, and it's ankle deep. And it looks like Kool-Aid. It's just bright red. And this big wound on the top of my head is leaking. And I can hear the guys knocking on the door saying they're back from the drugstore and they've picked up a first aid kit and we're going to wrap me up. So these guys had some weed and big ibuprofen pill.
Yeah.
So I took a ginormous ibuprofen, smoked a couple of joints, and wrapped myself up in butterfly bandages and gauze, and they pulled my fingers to pop them back into place. They were so cut up and scraped up from sliding for so long that the pull to reset them was excruciating. I thought they were just going to strip the flesh off my fingers. And one of the guys was saying, this bass player was saying that he was willing to stitch this hole in my face.
I can see the scar there.
Yeah, he said, I have a fishing line in the back of the truck. I could sew your face with the fishing line. So we ended up doing butterfly bandages to hold it together, but I decided against
the fishing line experiment. Yeah.
Well, the bassist sewing my face. But that was a horrifying experience. Having to ride home in that van with those dudes when I was supposed to take a driving shift.
Right.
That was horrifying. Explaining to them there was no way I was going to be able to drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a terrible trip.
Yeah. The third question, what is the thing in your life that you've lost that you regret losing the most?
Like a thing, not my friends, but a thing.
No, could be a friend.
Oh, definitely my friends.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Anything else I could replace? Those people. I lost some of the coolest people I ever knew. So, my friends.
To suicide, drugs, all of the above?
All of the above. All the usual suspects.
Yeah.
Those are the things that take our friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just telling somebody the other day, I had a suit that I got so that I could go to weddings at one point in my life because everyone was getting married. And the suit went in the closet once the sort of wave of young people getting married crested and broke. And then I started wearing it to funerals.
Mm-hmm.
And the gap just wasn't long enough, man.
Yeah.
You know, people started dying from addiction-related diseases and suicide. That's one of the worst things about getting older is so many people that were there before that aren't anymore.
I sometimes wonder if had I followed that other path, like had I been interested in math, if I would have known so many people that died that way so young.
I don't think so. I think that's the sort of dichotomy we're just talking about, the internal pressure that you put on yourself from the external pressure of fitting into straight society creates a lot of self-loathing and sadness in people, and they punish themselves for a good portion of their lives for not being the people that their parents or other authority figures in their lives hope that they would be, and that leads to a lot of self-destructive behavior.
Yeah,
a lot of self-medication, a lot
for
of
sure,
self-loathing. Tell me about a time you received an act of kindness from a stranger.
My favorites are always on tour. You know, being a musician overseas is one of the warmest, most rewarding things that's ever happened to me. There's moments overseas where people so there's this guy in France in a little place called Gérardmer, which is sort of at the base of the French Alps, and it's maybe a ski resort town with mountains and a lake. It's picturesque as all get out, and it's just beautiful. And there's this guy named Pascal I know there, and he owns an old hotel, and then there's a stage in the main floor of the hotel, and Indiana played there on our first trip across the ocean, and I fell in love with this place because it's like it's old hotel, and it's the best stage in town in this beautiful, wonderful place. So you could tell a lot of cool people had played on this stage throughout the years, and obviously everybody stays upstairs. And as the entertainer, they let you stay there. It feels haunted, and it's awesome. It feels like at any moment Billie Holiday or Miles Davis, some enormous fundamental people are going to
like wander around the corner.
Yeah, they're there.
Yeah. But it's a funny thing. You're in I'm guessing you were there in summer because that's when all the rock shows happen.
I was there in the summer, yes.
At a ski town, so it's going to have a little sort of deserted thing going on.
It's a weird touristy time. People are there because it's beautiful no matter what. It's like going to Vail or something. It's beautiful anytime you go there. But certainly ski season is the height. Now, I went there with Tim, and we played, and we had a wonderful time, and everything was great. In fact, some of our favorite stories happened right around that area. But when I got back, I was telling those stories, and And I think over some time, Lynn started to feel like she knew the stories as well, like she had been there as well. So last year, I got to take her to a lot of the places that the band has stopped over the years. And Pascal's place, Le Grattoir in Gerardmer, was one of those places. And I didn't have a show booked there. I wasn't really doing anything other than I was going to be coming from Germany and headed to Paris. And that's on the way. And the trains were on strike all throughout France at the time when we were there. So we rented a car in Germany and drove. And we got there, and of course, Pascal gave me a huge hug and kisses on my cheek and welcomed us. And we played a little impromptu show that night, and he put us up in the hotel, and again told me I was always welcome there. I could stay as long as I wanted, and that was always the case. Breakfast would be ready in the morning, and there's an appreciation somewhere, a level of appreciation that happens, especially to me in France, where people have been so warm and hospitable that I take my family there on vacation and threaten everyone with the fact that I will one day run away and
live there. Yeah,
end up taking one of these people up on their lovely offers to let me stay forever.
It's a recurring theme on this show. People talk about touring in Europe being so much better and different and extraordinary just because of the place that arts occupy in the European imagination.
Yeah.
And which kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what's your favorite place to gig?
I'd go to London any day.
Did you ever get to play the Luminaire in London?
No, I never played there.
It was in a weird place. It was kind of too far from this train station, but too far from that train station. So it didn't succeed, but ultimately, and I've talked about that a lot when this question comes up, but the Luminaire was my favorite rock show I've ever played, ever.
I love London. It's a great place.
Yeah.
I'd always go back to London. And that might be my answer, though I have to say I've played Spawn Ranch in LA a couple of times, and that's such a unique experience for me that that might be my favorite gig.
I don't know Spawn Ranch.
Sure you do. That's where the Manson family's all in the cave.
That ranch.
Yeah. So for a couple of years now, the family has been inviting me out to play these sort of picnic days in the cave. So I get to sit in that cave or on the rock that Charlie Manson sat on when he auditioned for Terry Melcher is there. These historic places. I played there this year on the 50th anniversary of the Helter Skelter crimes or whatever, August 8th and 9th. I played for the Spawn family descendants that are alive now and Manson family members that are alive now.
You've got some of Charlie's clothes in your art studio in there.
Yeah, I have lots of Manson family related stuff. Charlie's clothes and his artwork, and there's a lot of strange things from Charlie and a few of the girls that were on the ranch as well. People that I corresponded with while they were in prison.
Yeah. What was the curiosity that you had there?
I read Helter Skelter when I was like in military school, and I think what I liked about, or what I was intrigued about with true crime books was that they would be written by maybe a reporter for a magazine or like Helter Skelter was written by the prosecution, and they tell the story of what happened without any quotes from the bad guy. Like they never asked the bad guy why he did what he did.
Right.
Like that information might have come up in trial, and maybe some of them deal with that, but not quite as personal as the person writing the book doing an interview.
Right. Truman Capote, of course, when he wrote In Cold Blood, got all the way into...
It was great, right?
Yeah.
I mean, In Cold Blood is like the best,
Right.
the best true crime book ever, right? And Truman Capote is leaps and bounds a better writer than 99% of the true crime field.
Maybe 99% of writers. I mean...
Yeah, that might be fair to say as well. The true crime genre is not exactly aptly named. It's its own thing, and I think between Helter Skelter and a book about Richard Ramirez, The Night Stalker, by Philip Carlo, was these books. I was so interested in the rebuttal, like what would Charlie Manson say about this whole Beatles thing? Like, would he say he was a Beatles fan? Like, I wanted to know his versions of those same stories, or I wanted to hear how he brainwashed people from his mouth. So once I was out of military school, once I was out of my parents' house and had my own address, I wrote to people in prison. I did it for about 20 years. And at the height of it, I was writing 40 or 50 letters a week. And I would just say, I'm an artist from the middle of nowhere, and I'm interested in your case, and I'm interested in whether or not you made art when you were a kid, and whether you make art now, and how that art has differed over the years.
And you've got 2 of John Wayne Gacy's paintings in there.
Yeah, I think there's more than that.
Yeah. Have you thought about compiling those letters into a book?
Yeah, I've done a couple documentaries and been in some interview situations, and I have quite a bunch of that stuff. So I think about it, but I also think about releasing a book about my photography, and I need to release a couple of books about my paintings.
Yeah.
I need to keep touring, and I need to write a new record, and
right.
And I need to be a good dad. I need to be
kind of number 1 on the list.
I need to do a lot of things that, I don't know. Life's what happens when you're busy making other plans or something.
Did you reach any conclusions about these sort of personalities, Richard Ramirez, John Wayne Gacy, Charles Manson, some of the Manson family? Like, was there a unifying theme, or was there something that sort of...
There was for me. I did it as a writing experiment. I did it because I wanted some of their art, in all fairness. I wanted to collect art from famous names. But I also, I was learning something about writing. I was learning something about sharing and addressing people. I was learning something about how to deal with depression and regret. And I was learning it from very, very experienced people. I don't ask inmates about their crimes. I don't ask about murder. I don't want to know the details of crimes. I want to know about art, and I want to know about how they're dealing with themselves. That sort of motivated me to make that art project, which is all that was for me. All it is for me now is the collection. I met people that I was very intrigued with, that I absolutely enjoyed talking with, but I didn't meet anybody that I'm super friendly with today. You know, I didn't make friends with people that I'm inspired by, and that's pretty much how I decide who I hang out with.
When I read through the John Wayne Gacy book that detailed the circumstances leading up to the crimes that he committed, and then the criminal prosecution that followed, I thought that the whole situation of luring young men to the house and doing the handcuff trick and then murdering them just felt, it had a small town like tawdriness to it that reminded me way too much of situations from my small town adolescence where I was around older people who were maybe kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
And it felt uncomfortably close, but it didn't feel revelatory in any way other than that. Like, I didn't feel like there was anything about those crimes that was, it didn't reveal anything to me about humanity except like that Gacy was just a really fucked up guy.
That case was fucked up, period, right? But we were both potential Gacy victims.
Yes.
At one point in our lives. And I say that loosely. I mean, we were young men who
were potentially receptive to the lure of alcohol or drugs that we didn't have to pay for.
Right. I might smoke a joint with a guy who said he could give me a job where I was making more money than I normally. You know, he was offering a job as a painter.
Right.
In a construction team. This is somebody I might have talked to. And if he had weed, I probably would have smoked a joint with a dude.
Yeah, and I felt like Gacy was that for him, like he thought of his sociopathology was that he felt like, or psychopathology was that he felt like he was more moral than these people that he was killing, and the drugs thing was kind of a litmus test. Like, it was a setup. Like, you're weak, you'll take these drugs from me, and now I'm going to put you in the crawl space.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fair assessment of the whole thing. Yeah, I'm not sure that there was like a moral. There's a great cautionary tale to that whole thing,
yes,
but there's not a moral to take home with you. There's not a usable tool from the Gacy case other than
the whole thing just feels useless, and terrible.
Right. Like, some of them aren't so much, some things you might learn from Richard Ramirez's Satanism or the cult aspect of the Manson family or even the Jim Jones thing, and you might learn something. You might take away a big picture, but not from the Gacy thing. The Gacy thing was like just pathetic, like to take advantage of guys who are trying to make some cash with a legitimate job. And
well, I think that
who doesn't want a beer when you're 16? Right. You know what I mean? Right. That's not fucking fair. That's not fair.
But I think that when you talk about the Manson family or Richard Ramirez, you've got these people that are on the margins of society who aren't. And when you live in a society that has this sort of like nitro fueled capitalism, like we were living in the 70s, and there were people being left behind who were being isolated and got into drugs or got into whatever and felt further marginalized from society, they were kind of right pickings for someone like Charles Manson. Or Ramirez in his own head was like, I'm the ultimate outsider. Yeah. And I'm ultimately rejected by society, so I'm going to exact my revenge one human being at a time. And I think that like if there's something you can take away from those crimes, it's that like there are people who are just have been frustrated in every aspect of their life to just get by. But Gacy was just like a small business owner with a fucking serious screw loose.
Yeah. Problematic. That's what Gacy was. Dude had issues.
Yeah.
But he also didn't say, like, he didn't come clean. Like, he never said, yes, I killed all those people. You know, he denied it till the end. The whole, like, complete lack of closure that goes along with somebody who just says, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. I never did anything wrong. Like, there's nothing to learn there. There's nothing to take away. There's nothing to wrap it up for you. That case was just... it's exhausting.
It's tawdry is, I think, such a great word for that feeling of just like nothing about this is redeemable.
Yeah.
Next question. Visa and income considerations aside, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Yeah, I'd go back to London. I'd stay in London.
Yeah.
I love London. I love not being challenged by language. You know, and I love big cities. I you know, the street art scene in London is second to none. The whole, you know, it seems like there's something to do everywhere. It amazed me being in London how often I would go, oh, that's because it is Baker Street. This is the Baker Street.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
This has been a center for so much of Western culture. So much of what we consider canon came through London.
Yeah.
Everything from, you know, William Shakespeare,
Peter Pan. Everything happened in London. I mean,
right.
And it's like so many places where you're like, oh, well, this is that Whitechapel. This, you know,
right.
And it's that's what I love about London. There's so many places where you're just in history, and you walk into the next neighborhood and it's another complete history. Like, now we're in the Beatles neighborhood. Like, what the fuck? I'm walking across Abbey Road. Like, and it just all happens to be, you know.
Did you ever find your way to the Groucho Club? It's this kind of like a lot of media workers have memberships there. It's a private club. And I was working on a screenplay with a director from London who now lives in Brighton. But we would hang out at the Groucho Club. And, you know, it's like, of course, it's a bar. And a lot of smoking, which is a private club. But it's also a restaurant. And then there's some rooms there. If you need a pied-à-terre in the city... I just thought it was a really remarkable place and had amazing nights there, and just wondered if you'd ever been there. But it's in Soho, the Soho. Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's where that comes from. So many things like that.
What was you said that if you loved a gig in London? Is there a particular club there that you like?
No, we played a place called the 12 Bar that we had a great time in. There was a soccer match the same night.
Yeah,
and this bar was like a base for the soccer team.
Which team do you remember?
No.
Yeah.
No, I should know all this stuff, but I don't at all. And the people were like, you booked a show during the soccer game. And so we're playing against the game. A horrible scenario.
Yeah.
Because these people were from out of town,
right?
To say the least, right?
Yeah.
So they don't know us. There are only a handful of people that are there actually know who we are, and most of the people there are livid because there's entertainment during the game. But the people that we met there were impeccable. We had funny relationships with tons of people, met really old people who were like football fanatics, you know, soccer fans.
Yeah.
And didn't understand why we would be there, and we got to play for them, and you know, and there's something about that upright bass that's universal, and people love seeing that thing, and it sounds pretty.
Did Tim fly that thing over there, or was there one he used?
Oh, we got one there. In fact, we got them in different. We've had to rent them in different places. Yeah, they're not easy to move around. They're big.
No, I know.
They're big things.
Yeah,
the one in London was particularly interesting because we we rented a place that was only a couple of blocks away from the club where we were playing, which we thought was wonderful, and you know how convenient, and we went to pick it up, you know, a few hours before the show, and the guy's like, you know, here it is, and Tim says, you know, can it be delivered to the venue? And the guy's like, yeah, it's so many pounds, you know, $75 or something like that. And and Tim's like, oh, you know, it's a block away, you know, it's just around the corner. He's like, you could walk it. So we end up getting this like a travel case, like a flight case is what the thing's ultimately. So it's big enough for me to get in. It's a humongous case.
Yeah.
And he settles with, I'll take it over by hand. We'll walk it over. So he gets this flight case that has wheels, and we're walking through London with this enormous case. But by the time we got into the venue, the thing has rattled the bridge loose on the base. The bridge is like only supported on an upright by the tension of the strings.
Yeah.
And the shaking of this whole ride has sent the bridge askew, and now.
And it has to be placed precisely to get the pitch right? It's only
There's certainly a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and a sweeter spot. There's the best spot, and then there's acceptable.
Right.
Well, somewhat acceptable.
Right.
There's certainly a good way to do it, and a way that will just get you through. I think we found the way that would just get us through.
Yeah.
But the learning curve on renting an upright bass in a country that doesn't speak English, or that doesn't have a bus system or a way to a train that goes from town to town, and you know, because some of the towns that we play, like in France, are small towns. I didn't realize that you couldn't rent a car in some of these small, you know.
Right.
So there's a lot of learning curve, and with an upright bass, the curve
gets a little steeper.
Gets a lot steeper because moving it is a real chore.
Yeah,
it's a big thing.
Do you have an ideal musical instrument, and if so, do you already own it?
Like for me to play, I'm not a very good instrumentalist. I play guitar like I still play cowboy chords. I just kind of chunk my way through, and the guys saved me so much. And I like guitars, like aesthetically. I like the look of guitars. I love the way they look when you hang them on the wall.
Right.
So I bought most of the guitars I bought because I thought they looked cool.
Yeah.
Rather than some great tone or something like that. I'm not the guy I'm not a gearhead. No. That being said, my Martin acoustic is pretty special to me, and I would give just about anything for a really nice tricone kind of
resonator,
a national, an old resonator, something like Chris Whitley played. Chris Whitley is maybe my favorite guitarist.
Yeah, I'm not an acoustic guitar player by any stretch of imagination, but it seems to me that you sort of fall into two camps. You're either a Martin guy or a Taylor guy.
It seems like that's where it lands.
Yeah, and Taylors are really bright, and they're good for like modern country. And a lot of times I'll see guys in impeccably pressed flannel shirts and $400 boots at song swaps with a Taylor.
Yeah,
and then I'll have somebody come into the studio with an old Martin mahogany guitar, and I know I have a preference for that.
That guy wears tennis shoes. That guy is in Chuck Taylors.
Yeah.
And it's not a coincidence. There's something about like that. You're really onto something where the guy who plays a Taylor he has much nicer shoes, and it's not like a Taylor is naturally a more expensive guitar. It's not that. It's like a it's like a status thing. It's some other thing.
That's definitely my take on it. But I mean,
I think you're really onto something, because a guy who plays a Martin, it uses a Louisville Slugger. He drives a Ford F-150 in lieu of a Cadillac. You know, he's that guy, as opposed to...
Or an Audi.
Exactly. My Martin feels right. And and if you play something that feels, if that's what you're playing for, I think that's how I relate to it. I think you're onto something.
Yeah. Is there an instrument that you've lost, either through theft or having to pawn it or sell it to make money, that you deeply regret losing? Or
no, I guess not. That's strange, isn't it? I'm
going to knock on something for you.
I own most of the guitars that I've ever owned. The guitar I wrote all the Trainwreck material on, I still have. You know, I haven't had to sell gear. I've been able to continue to add to my collection of gear. I don't know that I could part with that. You know what I mean? Like,
It drives my sweet wife insane that I'm such a horse trader. Like, I've had drum sets that were like, this is the drum set I played for 700 shows in the 90s, and it was my first vintage kit, and I sold it for $1,200, and my wife is like, how could you let that go? I'm like, you know, the rack tom never sounded that great. You know, like,
yeah, there's something about them. I can't let them go. I
understand.
And it doesn't, like, they can progressively get worse. You know, they can sound worse now, because it's not like I'm keeping up with all of them the way that I should.
Yeah, that's the thing about having a lot of gear that has strings or heads on it. If you go to restring or put new heads on everything, that's a big financial commitment.
And a day.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to change all my string, you know. And I'm doing good to change all 6 strings at one time. Frankly, I change them as they break.
Yeah. If you could be a guest with any performer on a song to play a show, like, imagine you're at a show with someone that you really love performing, and they say, "Where's Matt? Hey man, come up here and do this song." Like, what would that song be if you could pick any song with any band or performer?
Wow. Jeez. I can't imagine having the balls to step on the toes of the people I admire that much. That's an interesting situation, though. Man. It's a good question. I've seen some really great players play. My job as a concert photographer put me at the foot of the stage so many times, getting to watch people do what they do. It was that education was really important to me, getting to watch people in their element. My favorite entertainer in his own element has to be Tom Waits. I would never interrupt a Tom Waits stage performance, but if I could share the stage with one person, God, Tom Waits would be.
Is there a particular song?
Oh my goodness. How could I interrupt on the Nickel? But I love that song so much. It's such a great story about 5th Street in Denver, and it's such a songwriter song. It's such a storytelling thing for me. It's such an intimate thing. I can't imagine interrupting it, but
yeah,
like, you know, there's things that I wish I would have written that thing. You know, I wish that was mine to claim. And so I guess in some ways, I the idea of being able to share that with him would be amazing. You know, the idea of playing with Springsteen would be. I can't. It doesn't make sense to me.
A particular Springsteen song?
No, I can't bring anything to that guy's table. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there's just the idea of me holding a guitar in front of Bruce Springsteen is embarrassing. I would only hold a guitar in front of Bruce to hand it to him.
Right.
to ask for a signature, to watch him play it. I can't imagine trying to say I deserve to be there. But I appreciate the question because because of the implication of being able to share the stage with my heroes is amazing.
Yeah. Last question. If you could imagine a taxi that can go anywhere in time or space, it's not constrained by physics or reality as we know it, and you got in the taxi, you said to the driver, "Hey man, take me home." Where's home?
What a beautiful thing that is. I would like to think he would take me to maybe 1981 in Brooklyn. As odd as that sounds, I think that's I think there's something about that art scene, something about that drive and ambition. If you think about Keith Haring and Basquiat and Kenny Sharp, maybe Andy Warhol, the art scene in the late 70s, the beginning of the 80s is the most inspirational stuff for me. It's the juice for me. There
was a lot happening in New York at that time.
Oh my God, the music scene that was there, the club scene that was there. There's so many unbelievable things. And to culminate art, to be involved in the art scene at that time frame
it's also important to think about the fact that was just after real estate prices in New York absolutely cratered.
Plummeted.
Yeah.
But that's what drew them all there. That's why they were all there, because they could all afford to do it. They could all afford to be there and not be making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
Which the creative pool, and you're talking about the Talking Heads and Blondie. And, oh my goodness, so much talent.
Yeah. Television, Richard Hell and the Voidoids.
Shut up. All right. There's so much.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I was into that nobody remembers, like Mink DeVille, who was sort of around that CBGB scene, but was more influenced by Memphis or Detroit soul than punk, but was playing on bills with those guys,
Yeah.
And Little Steven, when he wasn't with Bruce, was in that scene,
Chris Whitley was playing in Washington Square Park at the time, panhandling.
Right.
Some of the ideas of how much artistic juice was floating around there. I want to think that a good cab driver would know that's my home.
Yeah. Man, this has been really great. I really appreciate it.
Shit, man, the pleasure's been mine. I always like hanging out with you, dude. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. Just keep me in mind when you guys decide to take a drummer on the Indiana tour to France.
Man, oh man, that's what we need. What a heavy hitter!
I love playing with you guys.
We had a blast.
Yeah,
it was a good time.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that's episode 47, the Crash and Ride interview with Matt Aaron. I really like talking to that guy. He's kind of an intense guy, but so low-key about it. Like, you could almost miss it if you weren't, like, sitting directly across from him and asking him incredibly personal questions. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks to our erstwhile producer, Jake Kreger. He listens to every one of these episodes and sends me show notes telling me how to make the show better. If the show's better now than it was the first time you heard it, that's all due to Jake. Thanks also to Gene Wolfick and the band The Powder Room. The Powder Room provided all the music that you heard on this episode, the music in the intro and the bumper and then the little halftime thing, and what you're hearing underneath my voice right now is all The Powder Room. Most of these songs are from their first record, which is called Curtains. The one at the sort of halftime bit with the mental health announcements is from an album called Lucky. I played on the album Lucky. I didn't play on the album Curtains, but you can find all of their music at thepowderroom.bandcamp.com. Download it, throw them a few bucks. It's a really great band. Gene is currently out on the road with the Philadelphia band Plaque Marks. If they come to your town, go see them. Amazing band. Also, Gene is such an amazing performer. You really should see him play. Thanks also to Heil Audio for the great deal they gave me on these two PR40 microphones. The PR40 is a microphone that I have used in the recording studio off and on for years. Used to use it on snare drum or kick drum or bass cabinet. I've just now discovered this year that they're also great broadcast mics. If you want to make your podcast sound better, you could do a lot worse than checking into the Heil PR40. It's a very affordable microphone for the kind of sound quality you get. Highly recommend the Heil PR40. So I guess there's just a couple of days left in 2019. I hope that if you're anywhere near, you can get to that New Year's Eve show I'm playing at the Nowhere Bar here in Athens, Georgia. Otherwise, until we speak again, take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Ask for help if you need it. Go see live music, support your favorite band, and remember, loud guitars save lives.